this video, I'm going to be explaining to you what this is right here. It's my bullet journal grid guide or grid cheat sheet. And I'm going to be showing you how it works and how I use it to design my bullet journal layouts. Now this grid guide is something that was inspired by Amanda Rachel Lee. If you've ever watched her videos on YouTube where she does all these elaborate bullet journal setups, you'll notice that at the beginning of her bullet journal, she usually has a page where she writes out the number of squares. By squares, I mean the number or the section between each of the dots in her bullet journal. She writes down the number of squares going across the page and then down the page. And then she splits up the page into different sections. So if she wanted to split it into half, then she will note down how many squares does it take to get to the halfway point of the page, and so on. And I'll try to insert a screenshot of her setup. Now, while I really like that setup, for me, practically speaking, it wasn't enough, because when I was doing my bullet journal setup, if I needed to know, let's say, how many squares to allocate to one section of my layout, I needed to count from the beginning how many squares. And the best way for me was to use this. So let me show you how this works. It is basically just a clear plastic sleeve. This plastic is a somewhat hard plastic. And here it's clear from front back to front. And then it's got a top loading area here where you can slide in whatever you want. And that's how I got this piece of paper here, and the back, which is a piece of scrapbook paper. So this piece of paper is a 4mm dot grid paper, and that happens just to match the spacing in my bullet journal here. What I've done is, let's show you closer, hope that works, is on the top of this guide, I have drawn out the number of squares, or the number of areas in between each of the dots. I've drawn out the number of squares going from left to right, and here there are 30. Then on the right side, I have drawn out the number of squares going from top to bottom, and that's from 1 here to 45. On the bottom, I've counted the number of rows, but going backwards. So here we start from 1 on the right, and then we end on 30 on the left. Then lastly on this side, and I'm going from 1 at the bottom and counting all the way to 45 at the top. Another thing that I've done is for every 5 squares going from left to right, and every 5 squares going from top to bottom, I have drawn a line so that I can easily count every 5, 10, 15 squares, and every 5, 10, 15, 20 squares going down. Now, this grid guide, not only does it work as a grid guide, it serves multiple purposes as well. I can use it as a straight edge, because there's straight edges all along here, and that's almost a ruler. I can use this as a bookmark, because the way that I store it is, I have my bullet journal here, and let's say I wanted to keep it on this page, so I would slide it in here and then close the book. That would add as a bookmark. It's also a writing board, and a writing board is something that you put underneath a page when you're writing. So here I would slide it in, and let's say I was writing something on this page. I would write, and then it would provide a even writing surface on the back, and it would stop the pen from indenting too much onto the paper and, let's say, hitting the papers behind. Lastly, you could also use it as a calendar reference, which I have done here. And this calendar reference I've drawn out and just slid in the top. Same with all of the other papers. So let me just show you how it works in this bullet journal. And I'm also going to take this out of the cover here because it's easier for me to work without the cover. When I'm using my grid guide, I take a look at all of the dots on here and I line it up with the dots in my notebook. The first one is here, and you will be able to see that going across one page, I have got 29 squares. Then if I line up the grid from the top to the bottom, and I'm going to use this edge just to make it easier. This is the first square, and then going down, it goes all the way down to the 43rd square. I'm going to write that down on a scrap paper here because I'll need to use it later. This grid guide is actually bigger than this notebook. And the reason why is because I have two bullet journals. This is really my collections bullet journal. And this is my other one. And I made it so that it could work with both this and this. But it doesn't matter that this grid guide has 30 squares while this page has 29 squares because I can still use it the same way. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you how I draw out, let's say, a monthly calendar using this grid guide. This is something I think a lot of people like to do. They have a calendar for the month spread out over 2 pages. I have the whole month of February 2020. There's 7 days a week. That means there are going to be 7 columns. And I want 4 columns here and then 3 columns here. That's if I do a Monday start, then it's going to be Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And then on this page, it will be Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, and Sunday. But to make it easier, I'm going to divide this page into 4 and this page into 4. On the left side here, I will have a column for tasks. And hopefully you will see what I mean when it's all done. Another thing that I want to do is I want to leave a little space at the top for me to write the month, which is February. And I leave a little space at the bottom because here it says I've numbered the pages. This is number 50 and this is number 51. And I don't want the calendar to run over these numbers. That means that the border of this calendar is going to be, it's 2 squares from the bottom of the page. I'm going to draw that in pencil here just to remind myself. And then for the top part where I said February, I'm going to flip to another page here. And what I do is I just use this and I kind of measure how many squares does it take for me to do a header. And it's approximately 4, and I'm going to leave 1 more, so it's going to be 5. To come back to here, and I line up the dot again with the top dot here, and then I know that this line is the 5th dot, the end of the 5th square, and so I'm going to make a mark here, and I can count, but you might as well do this. And I'm going to again draw out a line just to make sure that I have enough space. And since this is all in pencil and I will erase it later, then it doesn't have to be completely accurate. And the middle part is where I'm going to put my calendar. I have 29 squares going across from each page, which I measured out already. And if I want 4 columns, that's 29 divided by 4, which is approximately 7. So here I would have, so each column is 7. And then because I have tasks Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, then what I will do is I will make the tasks 8 squares. So this would be 3 squares of 7 and then 1 square of 8, which is 8. And that would make 29. When I'm drawing this out, what I'm going to do is I'm going to shift this grid guide instead of having the last square line up with the 29th square in here, I'm going to have the last square line up with the 28th. Like this. And I'm going to make a mark on this dot because this is the 28th. And then if I know my multiplication tables, if we're going 7 squares for each column, then it's 28, 21, 14, 7. And then the last column here, which is the task column, is going to be 8 squares, which is correct. Then I'm going to do the same at the bottom here. You see that now I've done that. I'm going to mirror it on here. But this time I can start from number 1 and then go up to 28 or 29. Then I would just confirm that this last column here, which will be a little bit wider, is really 8 squares. And that shows 9 squares. This shows 9 squares because the number of squares on this side of the page, there are actually 30, whereas this has 29. And I think that's just the way the dots line up. So I'm going to move this to make the last column, which should be Sunday, to be 7 squares. There we go. I've now evenly spaced out the columns. Now I'm going to do the rows. I know that there are 5 weeks in February, and I need a little space at the top of the calendar for me to write down the day of the week. Let me just do that in pencil. I think I'm going to take 2 rows or 2 squares going down to write down the day of the week. Now that I've blocked out space for the days of the week, I can count the number of remaining squares I have to divide up into the 5 weeks of February. Here I have 34 squares. 34 squares divided by 5 is approximately 7, but that would mean the last week of the month would have 6 squares instead of 7. So I'm going to write that down. Each row, I'm going to make it 7. So 7 times 4 is 28. And then the last week of the month would be 6. Equals 6. And that's equal to 34, which matches 34 here. Next, I'm going to confirm that this last square here is 6 rows down, and it is. So I think what I'll do is I will make this, extend this to 7 squares, and so that means that there's a little bit less space here at the bottom, but I think that should be okay, just to make it even. And then this last dot here will almost cut into the page number, but it's close enough. It's all right. Okay, let me use this as a straight edge and see whether that lines up. This one doesn't line up because it should go to here, which means yep, there we go. Again, I'm doing this in real time, so this is the kind of things that I come up with when I'm doing my bullet journal layout. It's not going to be exact every single time at the beginning. Next, what I'm going to do is make sure I know what day February 1st falls on. And I come back to this little cheat sheet of a calendar in the middle here. I got this idea from a guy on Facebook. There's a Facebook group called Bullet Journal Junkies, and he got it from some other person in 2017. So I really have no idea who made this, but you may have seen this before. And I'm going to figure out when is the first day of February by looking, first of all, at the months here. Here's February. And if I want to find February 1st, I look on this row, and the February 1st is 1 here, and I go all the way to the right under this February column, and I know that February starts on a Saturday. And that means on the 29th, which is the last day of the February, it's here on this row, and that means February also ends on a Saturday. Going back to this page, that means I know that February 1st starts here on Saturday, and then it ends on Saturday. So I'm going to just make a quick pencil mark just to know, so I know where to draw. Right, now for the harder part, I'm going to start using pen. I'm going to follow the same color scheme and style of my existing bullet journal, and that means I'm going to go with a black and blue theme. For that, I have some fine liners. We start off with a Sakura Pigma Micron fine liner, and this is using the PN nib, which stands for plastic nib. We have another fine liner, same nib, but in blue. And then I have a third fine liner, which is the Uni Pen fine liner pen, and this is a dark gray, and it's in the 0.1 size. Last thing I'm going to use is a highlighter, and this is the Zebra mild liner with the colors all faded, but it's in the gray color. I feel like this doesn't line up. Let's see. Yeah, it doesn't line up, which means I've got this wrong. Okay, I think that looks better to me. Now with the pen. Well, there you have it. here is my real time. I will probably speed this up, but this is the way I plan or lay out my bullet journal spreads. I don't really use a ruler. I don't really care if it's perfect as long as it's readable, and I definitely make tons of mistakes. I hope that was helpful in showing you how the grid guide works, and it's way more functional for me to be able to use this as a grid guide and a ruler of sorts when I'm doing my layouts. And if you have any questions about this, let me know, and I will try to answer it as best I can. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.